Hey guys, it's RodimusPrimal. I am back with another video, and today I have for you guys the panel at RetroCon for Dan Gilvezan, who was the original voice actor for G1 Bumblebee. And unfortunately, my camera that we had set up on it, for whatever reason, it wouldn't record. We were having some technical issues like right at the beginning of the panel, and we were like literally set up like 10 minutes prior, but for whatever reason the technical issue happened. So I ended up using my cell phone to record the panel, and I was using a handheld selfie stick to try to hold up, so if I tried to like keep in on him as he was answering questions, there might be a little bit of jerkiness, so I'm giving you guys a preparedness for that. Of course, I ended up picking up his book Bumblebee and Me while I was at the convention. Of course, I had it signed on the inside there, and I am excited to share this with you guys. So without further ado, let's sit back, relax, make sure you're subscribed to the channel, and let's transform and roll out. Consider supporting the channel on Patreon, becoming a channel member, or purchase some merch on my spring store today.
That anything like the Transformers was going to go on and on, or that Amazing Friends was going to be popular, what, 40 years later. But thanks to the streaming services, and thanks in a way, no matter what you may think of Michael Bay, he at least kept the franchise alive. So he kept people interested in it. So I'm thankful to him for that. So no, it was a job. We did our best. We did what we were trained to do, and it's really gratifying to know that all of you guys are still enjoying it so many years later. So yes, no.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
By the way, if you have questions, you can line up next to Tom here, and he'll have the mic for you. But you have written a book, Bumblebee and Me.
Yes.
Life with a G1 Transformer.
Yes.
So it was an excellent book. I actually read it.
You read it.
I did read it. When you were writing it, did that give you any insights into that time?
Well, the reason I wrote the book was because I had done some conventions up to that point, and the questions all tended to be kind of the same. What was this like? What was he like? What was it like doing this? So I thought, well, you know what? Let me put it in a book, and it's not a long book. It's basically just my time on the Transformers, from my time being cast in the show through the recording sessions, which were crazy. I talk about my castmates, and I give a little bio what I thought of each of them. There's an entire chapter devoted to Wally Burr. For those of you who don't know, he was our voice director, and he was a real castmaster. So the book is basically there to answer all of the questions that you guys probably have or have.
It definitely answered my question.
Yeah.
Well, with all your work, now you've done a lot of live action as well.
Yes.
Now, was there a particular live action role that you found particularly challenging, whether physically or just as an actor that you really had a big heat?
No, but I'll tell you my favorite.
What's that?
I did 2 weeks on a show called Diagnosis Murder. Yeah, it was with Dick Van Dyke. And Dick Van Dyke, those of you who are old enough to remember, had an incredibly great show back in the 60s called The Dick Van Dyke Show. And I watched that show religiously, and he was a genius. If you ever get a chance, I think it's on Netflix, or you might take a look at it. He was like a god to me. And so to be on that show for 2 weeks, to be able to sit with him off camera and chat before we were called to the set, I was in heaven. I was in heaven for 2 weeks. It was just great. He told me stories about how I told him how much I admired him, and he told me how much he admired Stan Laurel of Laurel and Hardy. And when Dick Van Dyke came to town, he actually looked in the phone book, and he found Stan Laurel living in a small apartment in Santa Monica, and went over and visited, and they became friends. And when Stan died, Dick performed the eulogy. That's how close they became. So it's a generational thing. You know, one person's idol is the next person's waiting to be idol. So that was my favorite job of all.
Well, wouldn't you classify one of your favorites your time on Archie Bunker's place as you were?
Okay, he's gonna keep this thing up. He's gonna keep this up. Okay, here's what happened on Archie Bunker's place. Yeah, follow me. Moving back here now. See, I'm just going to drive you crazy. One of my first jobs was on a show called Archie Bunker's Place. This was after All in the Family. Archie Bunker had a bar that he bought, and he managed. And my job, I was billed as one of the kissing couple. And my job was to kiss this beautiful girl passionately, so Archie Bunker could walk by and go, "Get a room." And that was the joke. I spent the entire, and luckily it was a friend of mine. Her name was Sally Julian. So I knew her. So I basically made out with my friend for 8 hours and got paid for it. So that's the story. Are you happy now?
Yeah, I thought they wanted to know.
Okay, fine. Now you know.
Knowing is half the battle.
Exactly.
You always have to follow that.
Yes.
So with all your voice acting, I have to, as you come up with a number of voices for the characters you're portraying, what do you really look at when you're trying to come up with a voice for someone? Physicality, is it personality, age? What factors do you really concentrate on?
Well, generally when you're auditioning for these shows, as we were with the Transformers, you get a character sketch of what the character looks like, and a little blurb of what, he's big and burly, he's mean, he doesn't take any from anybody, whatever it may be, or he's small and frail, he's always frightened or whatever. So you try and take the physical and that sort of clue that they're giving you and meld it together. Meanwhile, the director is putting you in different directions. He's saying things like, all right, slow it down a little bit, pitch your voice a little higher, because he's a little younger. Yeah, that's good. Okay, now don't be so precise. Drop the G's at the end. Say going, say coming, instead of going and coming. So he'll kind of move you into a certain direction, and then when you're both happy with the product, you lay that down, and that goes to the producers, and the producers decide either, yeah, that sounds great for that character, or no, let's move on.
Is that how it is nowadays?
Well, yeah, pretty much. It's pretty much the same. Yeah, it's pretty much the same. You have character sketches and a small sample of dialogue and a small piece about who this character is. And that's certainly.
I have heard that sometimes because of the secrecy, they send you like 3 lines.
Yes. I recently, a couple of years ago, I did a show called Feud, which was the story of Joan Crawford and Betty Davis and their feud together. And when I read my part, it had nothing to do with that show. It wasn't even connected to that show. They just wanted to see what I looked like. So yeah, that's frequently what happens. That's a Ryan Murphy show who does American Horror Story, and he did Glee and a lot of other big shows. That's how he operates. He doesn't want any stuff out before it's out.
Yeah, a lot of video games are like that.
Video games too, you have to sign NDAs, non-disclosure agreements, agreeing not to say anything about what you just recorded until the game is out. So it's all very hush-hush. And I think it's way overdone, to be honest with you. It's like, nobody cares that much, right? I mean, come on.
Very true. Now, when you're recording today, I know in your book you had mentioned how you're all in a room recording together. Is that the case nowadays, or is it a lot more?
Yeah, unfortunately, back in the day when we did Transformers and Amazing Friends and all of those shows, the whole cast was in the room. And it was such fun, you would not believe. You had a room full of actors, comedians, improvists, class clowns. I mean, it was just bedlam, and I'm surprised we got any work done, to be honest with you, because there were all these people just trying to make the other person laugh, trying to make this person blow his line if he could. It was a lot of fun. Today, well, certainly for video games now, you're in the room by yourself, and you have a director who says, your character's just come to a brick wall, and your line is, ooh, should I go right or left? So he describes, the game as you go along, and it's really not as much fun. It's just kind of one line after another after another. It was really, old-time radio. None of you guys I'm too young to remember old-time radio, but in the olden days, before TV, there were radio shows, and you had to use your imagination. And they had a guy actually on the side of the set. They had, the actors would be at the microphones over here. Well, Mr. Hammer, it looks like a murder to me. Yes, Bill, it looks like a murder to me, too. I think I'll go through this door. And they'd have a guy over on the side, like a big door, and he'd go, wait, call the horse. And there'd be somebody with 2 coconuts going. So that was old-time radio, and that must have been just awesome to work on. Doing the shows back in the day was very much like that, except for the horse hooves and stuff like that, because they put the sound effects in there. So yeah, it was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun.
So when you're approaching a role that's live action as opposed to a voice role, how do you approach it any differently?
Well, yeah, you have to, because obviously with a voice role you only have your voice to use, so you've got to try and convey that character with just your voice. When you're doing on-camera stuff, you know, say the guy is he's ashamed. He's a shy person. He's ashamed of what he did. So you can use your body language to help with that character. If it's a voiceover, you have to somehow kind of make it just about your voice, you know, and get that feeling of awkwardness and shame and not knowing. See what I'm saying? So you don't have the physicality. It's obviously it's different in that way.
And you find it easier to, like when you were in the studio, getting or in live action, actually working off of other people as opposed to doing lines today?
It's always better to work off a partner. It's always better to work off another actor, because you never know what that actor's going to give you. He may give you something that you're not expecting whatsoever, and it throws you into a totally different direction, which throws him in. That's what creates the life. You know, that's what creates that feeling of life. When you're watching a cartoon show and those characters feel like they're alive, that's how that happens, because the actors are given free rein to sort of let it flow. Now that didn't happen a lot in Transformers. Wally was very, 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 very particular about the way he wanted these lines read. And he would sometimes do 10, 15, 20 takes of, don't worry, I'll take over. You go, Wally, go. All right. Take 1. Don't worry, I'll take over. No. It's don't worry, I'll take over. Okay, fine. Take 2. Don't worry, I'll take over. No, it's don't worry, I'll take over. And until you gave Wally exactly what he was hearing in his head, you were not moving on. I saw actors, professionals who've been in the business for years, reduced to puddles of goo on the floor under Wally's direction, because he asked for so many takes and they couldn't seem to give him what he wanted. It was hilarious.
You're a mean man. It looks like we have a question over here.
Yes.
I'm going to have you ask the question right here.
Okay, I have 2 questions, one serious, one kind of silly.
Okay.
The silly question was, I grew up on Spider-Man and the Amazing Friends, so I just wanted to ask, when you did the read-throughs in the room, was Miss Lyon there?
Well, when you consider the fact that Frank Welker was the voice of Miss Lyon, yes, she was. He also happened to do the voice of Iceman, too. But yes, Frank was Miss Lyon.
She was so cute.
I know, and so is Frank.
The serious question is, with the booming popularity of audiobooks, that has to be a really fun way for a voice actor to get work. I mean, I have the Harry Potter novels read by Jim Dale, and they are fabulous. So I was just wondering, is that something that voice actors such as yourself are getting into? Because, you know, each character has his or her own voice, and then you have the voice of the narrator in the book. So that seems to me like it would be a voice actor's playground.
Yeah, it is. I do audiobooks for a company called Beacon Hill Publishing, and I've done probably, 30 or 40 books for them over the last 6 or 7 years. So yeah, it's a great way to make a living. Plus, you can do it in your home studio if you want to. I've recorded a lot of books in my underwear. Some with no underwear at all. Oh, sorry, I'm hearing that's, sorry. Next.
Good afternoon, Dan. How are you doing?
Fine.
Okay. Well, my question is this. Now, obviously, back when they were doing the 1984 Transformers show, that was obviously a show meant for children. Then they did the 1986, the movie, and of course, you know, it was rated PG at the time. One of the things that kind of like jumped out at a lot of people, of course, was, and it, you know, everybody remembers, is that they killed off so many of the characters. But one of the other reasons I think they got a PG rating was because at one point in the film, when Bumblebee and Spike were on that moon getting out by Unicron, at one point, I don't know because it was off camera, either Bumblebee or Spike drops a four-letter word. Which
It wasn't me. It wasn't me.
It wasn't you.
It wasn't me.
Okay. Well, you say, as you said earlier, you were in the same room. All the actors
It was
were in
Corey.
the same room. So, what was the reaction when you actually had to go when that actually was said? Because
Well, first of all, it wasn't me who said it. It was Corey who said it. Corey Burton. And the reason that was put into the script was for that very reason. They wanted a PG rating. They were afraid. Excuse me. They were afraid if Transformers got a G rating, all the older kids would think, "Oh, that's for babies. You know, that's like a Disney thing. I'm not going to go to that." So they specifically put that one curse word in order to get the PG rating. Now, I was not at the recording session for the movie. I was probably busy doing something else, so I don't know. I wasn't there at the time. I had to come in and do my lines separately, and I spent about 20 minutes in the recording studio with Wally Burr, knocked my lines out, and I was done. So that's as good an answer as I could give you.
Hey, Dan.
Hey, did you know there's a thing growing out of your head?
My question is, what was it like working with your original 1981 Spider-Man colleague, Ted Schwartz? What was it like getting to know him?
I never met him.
Oh, you didn't?
No, I never met Ted Schwartz because he was the original, right?
He was the second original in the 1981 solo series.
Yeah, that I had nothing to do with that. They did that completely differently for me. That was weird. Because I was Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends, and they did a syndicated show at the same time with Ted Schwartz. And I was like, well, why aren't you using me for the voice on the other one? And they said, because we want them to be separate. These are the kind of decisions that are out of my hands. Producers make these all the time. So I know Ted, and I knew Ted, but we never worked together.
My next question is, when your show was on UPN back in like the late 90s, it was only like 17 years from 1981 when it originally came out, Spider-Man His Amazing Friends. Well, were you guys getting paid royalties in the late 90s when Spider-Man His Amazing Friends was on UPN?
Yes, I still get royalties. In fact, I got a royalty check for all 24 episodes. Recently, I think it was $4.18. I'm serious. It's been 30 years, and it goes on a sliding scale. And this thing slid off the scale at some point. I mean, I literally earned pennies for each episode. But yes, we still get residuals.
Thank you.
Max, and you need to see something about that growth on your head.
Hello.
Hi.
My question is, when you were getting the script for the movie, I heard all the cast, like, you got together and you were reading the script, and you all saw a lot of you didn't make it for the end of the movie.
I did.
Yeah. What was the general reaction in the room?
Well, I can tell you a story that Peter Cullen told me. He had not seen the script yet. Frank Welker had gotten a copy of the script, and they're looking through it, and Frank says to Peter, "Where do you get to page 18?" Peter goes, "What do you mean?" "Just move to page 18." And he was not happy. Peter was not happy about this at all, because he was the guy, and they were killing the guy. And when they kill you on a show, it means you don't have any more show to do. Like comic books and like cartoons and stuff, he came back. People and characters are never dead in comic books And don't let him kid you. Don't let him kid you. Who's the character? Gwen Stacy's still alive somewhere. Those of you Spider-Man fans, you know? Nobody ever dies. But he was not happy.
Well, I heard that, well, there was so much bad buzz they had to bring him back.
Exactly, yeah. And plus, can you imagine, I don't know how old some of you were when you saw the movie, but some 6-year-old watching his hero gray and die? I mean, it must have been really traumatic, you know? Crazy.
And my second question is, you were brought back for the Spider-Man Shattered Dimensions game because they were having everyone who had played Spider-Man before doing a different Spider-Man.
Yes.
Like, did you work with the other 3 Spider-Man?
No. Once again, video games, it's just you alone in the room. So I didn't. Now, Josh Keaton's a buddy of mine. He did one of the versions. Christopher Daniel Barnes is also a friend of mine. He did the other one, and
Neil Patrick Harris.
Neil Patrick Harris did amazing, I think. I did Spider-Man 2099. But no, you're literally in the recording booth by yourself. My director was in China, or Japan rather, and he would have to describe to the translator exactly how they wanted each line read. So it's very, very different than the old days when we had everybody together.
Two-tiered question, Mr. Gilvezan.
Gilvezan.
Okay. Often I hear that when an actor goes in to read for a role that they incorporated physical aspects, mannerisms, and the like into the character. If I may, what did you bring that they incorporated into when you did Peter Parker and Spider-Man? And for that matter, you have a favorite episode or guest voice, and with some of the repeating voices, I think Hans Conried was in, I think he only was in one, Jan Young was in one, William Marshall was in a couple. For some, like, say, Anne Lockhart, was almost like repertory acting to an extent.
I was in love with her, Annie Lockhart. She was June Lockhart's daughter. A beautiful girl. I'll tell you a story. This is a real Hollywood story about a Spider-Man and his amazing friends. This is the first time that Marvel had produced a show in-house. Up until then, they had always licensed their characters out to different animation companies, and the animation companies would take care of the rest. So the product was never what Stan Lee liked, because, you know, instead of fighting Doc Ock or the Green Goblin, he'd be fighting bank robbers or something like that. So finally Marvel decided they were going to do their own shows. So Stan Lee and a small group of his staff came out. They started an office out here, or not out here, but out where I live in LA. And their first project was going to be a Spider-Man and his amazing friends. So this was a big deal because this was the beginning of Marvel Studios. It was called Marvel Productions in those days, but it's now Marvel Studios. You've heard of them, I assume? Yeah. Yeah, they're big. Anyway, this was the beginning. So everybody in town was up for these parts. And I was thrown into the mix myself. A couple of weeks later, I got a call them. Because they want to hear some more out of you. I go to the callback. And they have like little pieces of dialogue for you to read. And the producer, the director, some of the network people are behind the glass with the audio engineer. And so I finished the second audition. They called me back for the third audition. Now, the third audition is a mix and match audition. This is the scariest and most horrific audition an actor can experience. It's called mix and match. Here's what happens is, you all sit in the outer room, and if they're casting for Spider-Man, Iceman, and Firestar, the casting assistant will come out and say, okay, Jim, come in and read for Spider-Man. Kelly, we want you to read Firestar. And Bobby, why don't you go read Iceman? The three of them would go in. Time would go by. Maybe Bobby would come out. They'd say, thank you very much, Bobby, you can go. Well, Bobby was effed at that point. Bobby knew he was done. So this goes on as they choose people, different combinations. The room gets winnowed down. Every time the casting assistant comes out, you're praying that he or she does not say your name, because it means you're done. At the end of the day, standing at the microphones was Frank Welker, myself, and Kathy Garvin. We did some lines from the show. The producer came out and said, "Congratulations, you're our team. We're going to start recording in another couple of weeks." And I was over the moon because I loved this character. I used to read Spider-Man comic books when I was a kid. I was like, the greatest thing that's ever happened to me. It's fantastic. Thank you, God. 2 weeks go by. I run into a friend of mine. She says, "I'm sorry about Spider-Man." I said, "What do you mean?" She said, "Well, I was a guest actor on the first show, and they were using somebody else for the voice of Spider-Man." I said, "What?" The producer came out and told me that I was the guy. I called my agent. My agent said, "Yeah, NBC, who has the final word, because they're paying for the thing, heard the three of you and decided that they didn't like you after all. They went with another guy." I was crushed. I was heartbroken. This business is cruel. This business doesn't care about you. This business is indifferent to your feelings. This kind of stuff happens all the time. But I took it philosophically. I said, you know what? I came out of nowhere. I'd never done an animated show before. And I got very, very close. So I tried to put a good face on it, and I went on with my life. 2 weeks later, my agent calls me again. He says, "You're doing Spider-Man." I said, "I'm very confused now. I'm very confused, and I hope you are too." I said, "I don't understand." He said, "NBC got the first show back. They listened to it. They don't like that guy after all. They're back to you."
Oh, man.
My immediate reaction is, "Hooray!" And then the immediate reaction is, "Holy cow." Because I'm going to be in the studio all by myself, just recording his lines. They already had all the other lines recorded, so all they needed was Spider-Man's lines. And I was counting on the fact that I had Frank Welker on one side of me and Kathy Garver on the other side of me, and I would just do what they did. If they were close to the microphone, I'd be close to the microphone. If they were far away from the mic, I would watch what they did, because I never did this before. Now I didn't have them. I'm sweating just thinking about this.
Oh, no.
So at any rate, I got through it. The director walked me through it. And our director, Alan Deinhardt, for the first season, was an ex-Marine. This gives you some idea of his attitude. He was really tough on us. I mean, I was drenched in sweat after we recorded Spidey's lines. Anyway, they inserted them. The network listened. They said, "We think it's fine now." Except every session, for the first like 3 or 4 sessions, I'd go like, "I'm the guy, right? I'm the guy?" And the producer would go, "We think so." Just torture me. Just torture me. So that's how Hollywood works, kids. You never know what's going to happen. It's a real roller coaster ride. It's a real roller, and you got to have a tough skin if you want to exist in that business. So that's kind of a long way around it, but I thought it was kind of an interesting story to share, to show you how things work out that way. Hi.
Hello. You're just a big inspiration to me since I was a kid. That's something I want to do, voice acting in the future. My question is, what is your most favorite role, either in animation or in acting?
Well, it's between Spider-Man and Bumblebee. Those are my two favorites. Spider-Man, because that was my first, and I was also a big fan at the beginning. And second, because Bumblebee has gone on to such an iconic character. I mean, I'm proudest of those two. And as I said before, my 2 weeks on Diagnosis Murder with my idol, Dick Van Dyke, I played this crazy con man kind of thing that, I was trying to do like undercover stuff, and Dick kept trying to stop me, and I was in heaven for 2 weeks. So, wow. Yeah, those things. Thank you.
I was a huge fan of Spider-Man and his Amazing Friends when I was a kid.
You're a man of great taste.
Most recently, too, I went ahead and showed my girlfriend the cartoon, and one of those common things that she found and noticed about the cartoon was a little triangle between Spider-Man, Iceman, and Firestar.
Yes.
So when you guys were doing the recording sessions, were there any jokes that you can remember that you guys probably had maybe that didn't make it into the cartoon? And
go ahead.
My second question is, too, with the voice sessions, did you ever have Stan Lee sessions with you guys? And if you did, what was he like?
Yeah, Stan would actually, when Stan came in after we did our stuff and would do his intros and all right, true believers, you know, Doc Ock is on the scene. We'll see what happens now. We would say hi to him in passing, because we had finished our work, and he would come in. As far as a romantic triangle, I understand that Iceman and Firestar dated. Let me put it that way, they dated. I can only imagine like a pool of water on the floor. But Kathy and Frank actually went out, and Kathy and I have remained friends, and I see her quite frequently. She comes to the house to parties and stuff. I said, "Is it true you and Frank were having a relationship?" She said, "Yes, yes it is." So there's a little tidbit for you.
Oh, that's very hot.
Take that home, and don't tell anybody where you heard it. So you see that you had that growth taken care of. I see.
Dan, my question is, what was it like getting to know two of the original voices of the Green Goblin that worked at you? Marvel Productions back in the early 80s. Their names were Nielsen Ross and Dennis Marks. What were those guys like?
Well, Neil was and is a premier voiceover artist. He did a lot of Transformers episodes. He did a lot of G.I. Joe. Many of you know Neil's work. Believe it or not, Dennis Marks was our producer. And he said, "I want to be the Green Goblin. I can do it myself." And he did a pretty good job. That was the first episode, since Green Goblin is really an iconic villain in the Spider-Verse. So yeah, Dennis, our producer, did the voice.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Hello. My name's Pete. Nice to meet you, Dan. Sorry if this is a stupid question, it's been asked 1,000 times, but obviously Frank Welker went on to voice Megatron in Transformers. Was he in your recording sessions for Transformers?
Oh, yeah.
And were you like, hey, remember me from Spider-Man?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Frank. Frank's like a god in the voiceover world. I mean, anytime that you see a movie or a television show that has a dragon or an alien or a monster or some kind of animal, it's Frank, chances are. I mean, he's incredibly talented. He can do the sound of a cricket that makes you searching in the room to find the cricket. It's so good. He's unbelievably good. And I learned so much from him. And yes, you know, we were friends. That was my first job, and then Transformers was really my second. And as I said, we were all there together. I got another story about Frank. By the way, this story is in the book Bumblebee and Me. I have a few copies at my table, and I was going to say this later, but I'm going to say it now. They're selling for $50, but I want the people who came to this panel to have a chance to have a discount. So if you come to the table, I think we have 8 copies left. If you come to my table and say, "Till all are one," that's the secret phrase. We're charging $50 for an autographed book. I will give it to you for $30, just for being here. Don't pass that along to anybody, okay? Story about Frank. Frank Welker never wore a pair of closed shoes that I ever saw. He was always in sandals, and shorts if possible. A couple of weeks before the session, I had read in one of these men's magazines that when a man is having an orgasm, his toes involuntarily curl. And I was watching Frank at the microphone as Megatron, and Dan, his toes were curling all over the place. And I thought, Frank really enjoys his work.
Thank you very much.
Okay.